My name is Margaret Louise Beckett, but everyone in town just calls me Maggie. I'm 67 now, with silver hair that used to be fiery red, and the heart that still carrega marcas do que vivia mais de 4 décadas. I was only 18 years old when I married James, a charming, ambitious man of 29, in a small Baptist church in Sweetwater, Texas. Back in 1981, I wore my grandma's lace veil and believed I had found my forever. But I had no idea that forever could shatter on an ordinary Tuesday morning with coffee brewing, the sun high over the prairie, and a knock at the door that would crush my world. James worked at a local construction firm. His boss, Carol Ann, was older, divorced, and commanding someone I once admired, and even called friend. But it was her voice I heard in the background of the call. James forgot to hang up. It was her perfume on his jacket when he came home late. And it was her lips I saw pressed against his. Behind the tinted windows of her truck, parked behind the hardware store, where no one was supposed to see, the betrayal didn't just ruin a marriage, it humiliated me in front of the whole town. Her, a boss, him, a husband, and me, a young woman raised to trust. The core of this story is betrayal, deep, personal, and public. The tone, raw, the emotion, devastating, and the scenery. Dusty sidewalks, sweltering heat, cicadas crying at dusk. My heart didn't just break. It cracked open in the middle of a Texas summer, in front of the same people who once danced at my wedding. I know it sounds unbelievable, but my husband was sleeping with his boss. Not just any boss, a woman twice my age, with a diamond watch and a reputation for eating men alive. And he was supposed to be my forever. You ever had a moment that split your life in two? Before the truth? After the truth? I had that moment while folding laundry, barefoot, still smelling like pancakes and morning coffee. My name is Margaret Louise Beckett. Everyone here in Sweetwater, Texas, knows me as Maggie. They know me as the girl who got married young, wore a long white dress, and believed in love like it was gospel. But what most folks don't know is what I saw through that dusty truck window that summer afternoon. What I heard in that voicemail he never meant to leave. And how a woman I once called friend burned my world down with a smile. Do you know what it feels like to be replaced not by someone younger, but by someone who holds a clipboard and signs your husband's paycheck? It's not just betrayal. It's humiliation. It's losing your place in a story you thought you were writing together. So why am I telling this now? Because some wounds fester in silence, and some truths beg to be heard. Before we dive into the hardest chapter of my life, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. These stories are real, raw, and written in the voices of women like me who stayed silent for too long. Now, tell me something. What would you do if the woman who ruined your marriage gave your husband a promotion to keep him quiet? Let me take you back to that summer in 1981, where the sun was hot, the air was thick, and a good woman me was about to learn just how cold betrayal can be. The summer of 1981 came in dry and angry. The sun hung low and mean over Sweetwater, Texas, cooking the red dirt roads and making the porch wood groan under bare feet. You could hear the cicadas screaming by noon, and feel the sweat slide down your back even when you weren't moving. It was the kind of heat that made your bones lazy and your mind wander. I was 18, and in love. Or at least, I thought I was. We lived in a small white house 2 blocks from the water tower, with a picket fence James built with his own calloused hands before we said I do. It leaned a little on the west side, just like my faith would later. Every morning, I made eggs with pepper jelly toast and poured sweet tea into mason jars before James headed off to work in his beat-up Dodge. His cologne lingered in the kitchen long after he was gonna cheap, strong, but familiar. Back then, I didn't question why he stayed late so often. We're pushing a new site, he'd say, and I'd nod. I always nodded. That was what wives did. You smiled, served dinner, and folded clothes while reruns played on the little box TV we kept in the corner. I didn't know yet that while I folded his jeans, Carol Ann, his boss, was unbuttoning his shirt. Sweetwater was the kind of town where gossip traveled faster than the mail. But no one ever whispered to me. They smiled, waved. You got yourself a good man, Maggie. And I'd smile back, like a fool. Because love, real love, makes you blind and proud. Especially when it's all you've got. I was just a girl who believed too hard in fairy tales and too little in gut feelings. There were sins I see that now. Perfume that wasn't mine. Receipts from diners I'd never been to. The way he started shaving on weekends again. I asked once, joking, "Who are you getting all handsome for?" He kissed my cheek and said, "You, sugar." I believed him. God help me. I believed him. The day everything started unraveling wasn't loud. There was no storm, no slammed doors or dramatic pauses. Just quiet. A suffocating kind of quiet that you only notice when your world is about to change. James had left early that day, too early. The coffee hadn't even finished brewing, and he didn't touch the breakfast I made. He mumbled something about a meeting and kissed my forehead without looking me in the eye. I stood at the kitchen window, watching that truck of his disappear down the road. Something in me sank. I couldn't name it yet, but it felt like the moment before a bad dream starts. The air was still, too still, like the whole town was holding its breath. That's when I heard the phone ring, and with it, the first crack in the world I had so carefully built around me. The phone rang only once, and that one ring was all it took to spin my soul into a place it had never been before. Back then, we had one of those cream-colored rotary phones, with the long, tangled cord, mounted on the kitchen wall next to the spice rack. I picked it up out of habit, wiping my hands on the hem of my apron. "Hello?" No one answered, but I heard breathing, and then laughing. A woman's voice, smoky, confident, playful. It wasn't meant for me. It wasn't even meant for me to hear. "I told you not to kiss me. There, your wife might smell it." The words crawled through the receiver and wrapped around my throat. I didn't hang up. I couldn't. I stood there frozen, one hand on the wall, my heart thudding in my chest like a scared rabbit. The line went dead seconds later, but that laugh, it stayed with me. It had teeth. I didn't know what to do. James had barely been gone 15 minutes. Was that call meant for someone else? Was it some sick joke? My mind tried to build excuses as fast as it could, but my body already knew. My gut already knew. I sat down at the kitchen table, the wood cooled against my arms. Everything in the room looked the same: dishes stacked in the sink, morning sun painting the linoleum floor. But nothing felt the same. Something had shifted. The silence felt like a verdict. Later that evening, I asked James how his meeting went. He gave me one of his easy smiles and said, "We're closing on the Henderson deal. That woman's a genius." That woman. I pretended not to notice how softly he said it. I watched him eat the roast I made without tasting it. I watched him laugh at Johnny Carson like nothing had changed. And I wondered how many lies a man can tell without his voice shaking. That night, when he undressed, I caught a glimpse of lipstick on the inside of his collar. Cherry red. The same shade Carol Ann always wore. I had complimented it once at a Christmas party. "Looks good on you," I'd said. She smiled and replied, "Men love a bold woman." I wanted to scream. I wanted to accuse him right then and there. But I didn't. I said nothing. I lay in bed beside him, the sheets cold, my body stiff, and I stared at the ceiling fan turning slow above our heads. I counted the blades, turning and turning, just like my thoughts. Because when you grow up believing that love means endurance, you confuse silence with strength. And I had been taught to endure. The next day, I went about my chores like always. Fed the neighbor's cats, hung laundry on the line, smiled at Mrs. Klein at the market. But something in me had cracked. And once a crack forms, it doesn't just disappear. It waits. And I was starting to feel watched. There's something strange about knowing something before you know it. Your body senses the storm before the clouds form. That was me. I couldn't sleep. I'd lie awake, listening to James breathe, wondering if he dreamed of her. And every morning, I'd put on my apron and pretend I was still someone's wife. The house felt different. Too quiet in some corners. Too loud in others, like the ticking of the kitchen clock. Suddenly, unbearable. It ticked like a countdown, and I didn't even know to what. One afternoon, while folding towels in the laundry room, I found a receipt tucked inside the pocket of James's jeans. 2 ribeyes, mashed potatoes, and 2 glasses of red wine. At Rose Hill Bistro, a place we had never gone together, I stared at the slip of paper like it had punched me in the chest. We couldn't afford to eat there. He always said it was too fancy for us. But apparently, too fancy wasn't a problem when it wasn't me sitting across the table. I wanted to ask, to throw it in his face, demand the truth, beg for it if I had to. But I didn't. I tucked the receipt back in his pocket like I hadn't seen it. And that night, when he kissed my forehead and whispered, "You're too good for me," I finally believed him. It was during those days that I started watching myself from the outside. Like I wasn't even real. Just a character in someone else's story. A woman who scrubbed the same dishes every night, trying to erase a lipstick that wouldn't come off. Then came the smell. Perfume. But not mine. Sweet, spicy, with a citrus finish I couldn't name, but I knew it didn't belong to me. It clung to his collars, his car, even his pillow once. Faint, but undeniable. I buried my nose in it when he was at work, and cried like a widow. I began collecting the betrayals like keepsakes. The way he rushed out after dinner, the sudden gym membership, the locked briefcase, even the way he started humming in the shower songs I'd never heard before, with a joy that didn't come from me. It was like he was already living a second life, and I was just the ghost of the first. Then one Sunday after church, I saw them. James said he had to run an errand, left me with Mrs. Walton and her stale banana bread. I decided to take the long way home, walking through town to clear my head. And there, parked behind the supply store, was Carol Ann's black Chevy Silverado. I knew it. Everyone in town did. She always parked crooked, like the rules didn't apply to her. And James, he was in the passenger seat, laughing, with his hand on her knee. I didn't confront them. I couldn't. I froze. I watched through the dusty glass as she leaned over and whispered something in his ear. He grinned, that same grin he gave me on our wedding night, and my heart broke like glass under a boot heel. I walked home without remembering how my feet moved. By the time I reached the porch, my throat burned and my hands were shaking. And yet, I still didn't tell anyone. Because when betrayal walks in wearing a familiar face, you don't scream. You go quiet. You build walls inside yourself and start to disappear behind them. There's a kind of grief that doesn't come with funerals. It doesn't wear black or bring It's the grief of watching yourself vanish, little by little, while the world keeps spinning like nothing happened. After I saw James with Carol Ann in that truck, something inside me collapsed quietly, not with a scream, but with a whisper that never stopped echoing. I still smiled at the neighbors, still baked cornbread, still said, "Bless your heart" at church. But inside, I was gone. I stopped looking in mirrors. What was the point? The woman staring back at me had hollow eyes, a forced smile, and a sadness so deep it made my bones ache. I used to braid my hair before bed, rub lavender oil on my wrists, and hum old Patsy Cline songs while I dusted the shelves. Now, the house was clean, but empty. Like me, James didn't notice. Or maybe he did and didn't care. He came and went like a guest with keys, said good morning without looking me in the eyes. And I responded like an actress, too tired to remember her lines. At night, I curled up on my side of the bed and tried to breathe slow. I didn't want him to hear me cry. I didn't want him to feel guilty. Isn't that insane? I was protecting the man who was destroying me. I started skipping church, stopped baking, let the garden die. The neighbors thought I was sick. In a way, I was. Carol Ann started calling the house. I'd answer, and she'd pretend to ask about something from work. Always polite. Always sweet. Like she wasn't carving up my life with every word she said. I once caught James smiling at the phone after hanging up. He didn't know I was watching. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't his home anymore. She was. There were nights I stood at the kitchen sink, hands shaking, eyes fixed on the knife block. Not because I wanted to hurt anyone, but because I needed to remember what control felt like. I felt invisible, like the wallpaper, like dust. And yet, every morning, I still made his coffee, still folded his socks, still waited for something that would never come. Remorse. One evening, I found a gold earring on the floor of our bedroom. Not mine, not even close to my style. It was shaped like a leafed delicate, expensive, and utterly out of place. Like her. I held it in my palm, stared at it like it could talk. It didn't, but it said everything. That was the night I finally stopped praying for him to come back. Not because I didn't believe in God, but because I finally understood. Some people pray for rain while standing in fire. And I was done burning. Healing doesn't always begin with hope. Sometimes, it begins with anger. A quiet kind of rage that rises, not with screams, but with stillness. I didn't plan it. I didn't even know I was changing. But something shifted the day I picked up that earring and didn't cry. Instead, I laughed. A sharp, hollow, bitter laugh that sounded foreign in my mouth. I looked at that gold leaf and thought, of course she'd drop something in my home and not care. That was the moment I realized she didn't fear me because I hadn't made myself worth fearing. I spent the next day cleaning the house like a woman possessed. Not to impress James, not to pretend nothing was wrong, but to reclaim every inch of space she'd contaminated. I scrubbed the sheets, threw out his cologne, even burned the roses he brought home one night just because. I didn't want a single reminder of their lies living under my roof. I cut my hair the next morning, with sewing scissors, in front of the bathroom mirror. The strands felt like memories at my feet, long, heavy, full of time I'd never get back. I didn't cry, I watched. I started sleeping in the guest room. No explanation, no discussion, just silence. He noticed. He said, "You okay, Maggie?" I looked at him, really looked, and for the first time, I didn't see my husband. I saw a man I had propped up for years, a man who mistook my loyalty for weakness. I said, "I'm fine, just tired," and went back to folding the sheets my way. A week later, I visited an old friend, Mary Ellen. She lived 2 towns over and had always been louder than me, braver. We sat on her porch drinking lemonade, the wind catching her silver hair as she said, "You look different, Maggie. What's going on?" And I told her, everything. She didn't gasp. She didn't pity me. She just nodded and said, "Well, honey, you got two choices. Stay broken and quiet, or rise up and raise hell. And I've seen you plant tomatoes in drought too. Got fight in you." That night, I stood barefoot in my kitchen, staring out the window at the moonlight on the porch, and I whispered, "I deserve better." It was barely audible, but it came from my chest, from my ribs, from the place where I used to carry shame. I didn't leave him that night. Not yet. But for the first time in years, I chose myself. And that was louder than any goodbye. I stopped asking where he was, stopped texting the pager at work, stopped putting his plate in the oven when he said he'd be late. Let it go cold, just like my heart had gone. James didn't notice. Or maybe he did. But I noticed him. The way he flinched when I got quiet. The way he hesitated before coming in from the garage, like he wasn't sure who was waiting on the other side. The game had changed. And even though I hadn't said the words yet, he felt the shift. I began leaving small reminders around the house. A single pillow on our bed, only one towel folded in the bathroom. I started locking the door after 9. He'd knock, and I'd take my time answering. He started to squirm. One night, he came home with a bottle of wine and said, "Thought we could have a nice evening? Like old times?" I raised an eyebrow. "You mean before or after the cheating?" He blinked. That was the first time I'd said anything. He stammered, "What are you talking about?" I stood in the doorway, arms crossed, chin high, Carol Ann's earring, Rose Hill Bistro, perfume, her damn Silverado parked behind the feed store. "You still want to pretend it's nothing?" He froze. The silence that followed was heavier than any scream could have been. I watched his face contort denial, shame, calculation. "You don't understand," he started. "I understand enough." I cut him off. I walked past him like he was a piece of furniture I no longer liked, sat on the couch, turned on the radio, let Patsy Cline fill the room while he stood there, stunned, like a boy caught cheating on a test. For the next week, he tried to overcompensate. Flowers, compliments, chores. But it was all hollow. One night I came home from the store and found him sitting on the porch with Carol Ann, like it was normal, like she belonged there. She smiled, had the audacity to say, "Hi, Maggie, hope you're well." And I just looked at her, at the gold leaf earring in her left ear, the twin of the one I had hidden in my jewelry box. "Nice earrings," I said, cool as ice. She blinked. James coughed. I walked inside without another word. That night, I threw his things into boxers. Not to leave, but to remind him, this wasn't his home anymore. It was mine. And if anyone was going, it would be him. He didn't yell, didn't fight, just stared at the boxers and said, "So this is it." I didn't answer, because some endings don't need punctuation. They just hang in the air like smoke. It happened on a Wednesday, the kind of day that looked innocent enough. Clear sky, birds chirping, a breeze soft enough to forget the heat. But there was something in the air, like something waiting to break. I was picking up fabric at Marla's shop, planning to sew new kitchen curtains. Not for James, not to impress, just for me. I was starting to make things mine again, little by little. And then, she walked in, Carol Ann, in her high heels and her smug little smile, like she owned the whole damn town, like she hadn't been in my house, wearing her perfume on my pillow. Our eyes met. She hesitated for half a second, then forced a smile and said, "Well, Maggie? Long time." I nodded, calm, collected, burning on the inside. "Sure is," I said, running my fingers over a bolt of sunflower-printed fabric. The same one I'd used to reupholster the chair he used to sit in. She cleared her throat. "James, he's been a little lost lately. I hope you two work things out." I turned, really turned, faced her square, with all the weight of every sleepless night, every lie, every silent dinner. "Don't you dare talk about my husband like you didn't lay with him while I was folding his clothes," I said. Her mouth opened, but I didn't let her speak. "You took something from me that wasn't yours. Not because you needed it, but because you wanted to prove you still could." Her smile faltered. I stepped closer. "I know your type. Women like you feed off what other women build. You don't fall in love, you conquer. You mark your territory with lipstick and secrets. But guess what? You didn't win. You didn't take him. He gave himself to you. And that's not something I'll ever beg to keep." She looked away, and for the first time, I saw something crack behind her eyes. Maybe it was shame. Maybe just annoyance. I didn't care. "You know what's worse than being cheated on?" I asked. She didn't answer. "Being cheated on by someone you once called friend." I walked past her, fabric in hand, and said over my shoulder, "You can have him, but you'll never wear my piece." I didn't look back, didn't wait for a reply. Because some victories aren't loud. They're silent, steady, and stitched one thread at a time, just like the curtains I'd hang that night. He came home early that day. I was at the kitchen table, sipping sweet tea and thumbing through a seed catalog, planning the spring garden I'd plant alone. The screen door slammed, and for a second, I braced myself for silence. But he spoke. "Maggie," he said, voice cracking. I looked up. He wasn't the man I married. Wasn't even the man who betrayed me. He was something in between. Broken, desperate, unfamiliar. "I know what I did," he began, eyes wet. "I know I don't deserve anything from you. But please, just listen." I stayed seated, calm, a storm inside a still lake. "I thought I wanted something different," he continued. I don't know what I thought, but she's not you. She never was. She never could be." I didn't blink, didn't cry. I just stared at him and waited. "I've been sleeping on a friend's couch," he confessed. "I can't sleep. I can't eat. I keep seeing your face the day I left. I messed up. I destroyed everything. Please, Maggie, tell me there's a way back." I stood up slowly, walked to the sink, poured out my tea. I used to pray for this moment. I said, my back to him. I used to cry myself to sleep, hoping you'd say these words. But now that I'm hearing them, I feel nothing. He stepped forward. "I'll do anything. I'll quit my job. I'll go to church." I turned, and for the first time in months, looked him straight in the eyes. "You should have fought for me when I was too broken to fight for myself," I said. "You should have chosen me when I was still choosing you, even after I knew." He lowered his head. "I'm not angry anymore, James. I'm tired. Tired of giving chances to a man who didn't see me until I was gone." He fell to his knees, right there on our linoleum floor, and cried. "I love you," he whispered. I walked past him and whispered back, "I used to love me less than I loved you. That's the part that's over." I went to the porch. The wind was soft, like a hush over the town. The sky was lavender, and I knew I hadn't just survived betrayal. I had survived forgetting who I was. And now, I was coming back. Healing didn't come overnight. It came slow, like warm molasses on a winter morning. It came in quiet moments, watching the sunrise from the porch with coffee in hand, or feeling the breeze brush my cheek without needing to share it with anyone. I began rearranging the house, moved the couch to face the garden, repainted the guest room where I'd once slept alone, and turned it into a sewing space just for me. I donated the box of his things I had packed, not out of revenge, but release. I changed the curtain. The ones I had sewn weeks earlier, after confronting Carol Ann's sunflowers, not because they were pretty, but because they turned toward the light. I started baking again, not his favorites, but mine. Pecan pie with cinnamon crust, lemon bread, just tart enough to make me smile. The radio stayed on more, and for the first time in years, the music wasn't sad. I reconnected with old friends. Mary Ellen came by with a bottle of peach wine and said, "You got color in your cheeks again, Maggie." I smiled, touched my face, and whispered, "I think I'm coming back." I read books that had sat unopened on the shelf for years. I wrote letters to myself and burned them in the backyard, watching the smoke carry away words I never said when I needed to. Why wasn't I enough? Why did he do it? Why didn't I leave sooner? And one day, I didn't ask those questions anymore, because I realized his betrayal was about him, but my healing, that was about me. The nights grew softer, sleep came easier, and the silence that once felt like punishment became peace. I planted tomatoes again, watched them rise from the dirt like tiny soldiers, stubborn, alive. And as I held the first red fruit in my hand that summer, I whispered, "You made it." And I wasn't just talking to the tomato. I no longer looked for his truck, didn't count the hours or wonder what he was doing. I stopped writing pain in my mind and began writing poetry on scraps of paper, tucking them into drawers like little reminders. You're still here, you're still you, you're still worthy. For the first time in years, my heart beat just for me. It wasn't a dramatic moment. No doors slammed. No suitcases rolled down the driveway. Just me, sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee, and the morning sun painting gold on the wooden floor. That was the day I knew I had come back to myself. I didn't want him back, didn't want an apology carved out of guilt. I wanted peace. And peace doesn't come when someone returns. It comes when you do. One afternoon, I found the wedding photo in a dusty old album, us, smiling. Me, in lace. Him, full of promise. I looked at it for a long time, then I slid it into a drawer and closed it, gently. Not out of hatred, but closure. I stopped explaining my story to people. Some still whispered at the market, "Poor Maggie." But I wasn't poor. I was rich in something they couldn't see, liberty. I began teaching quilting at the community center, told stories through fabric, used pieces of old shirts, curtains, even scraps of the tablecloth we ate on for years. Women gathered around, stitching and laughing, And someone said, "You've got a light in you, Maggie." And I did, because I had finally stopped asking someone else to hold it for me. One night, it rained hard. Thunder cracked, wind howled, and I stood barefoot in the yard, arms open, letting it soak me. I laughed. Not because I'd forgotten the pain, but because I had survived it. I wrote in my journal that night, "He didn't break me. He showed me the cracks." And I filled them with gold. Some people never say sorry. Some wounds never get justice. But I learned something. Freedom isn't given, it's claimed. And I claimed mine in silence, one step at a time. Now, I sit by the window every evening with tea and music playing low. I watch the street, the leaves dancing, and I smile, not because everything's perfect, but because I'm not pretending anymore. If you also carry the scars of a story no one else saw, leave your comment below. I read every single one with love. And if this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and stay with me. Here, every pain becomes a story, and every story, a step back home. Click the video on your screen right now. You'll hear the story of another woman who also thought she wouldn't survive. But she did, and she bloomed, because we bloom. Even after, especially after. Dear Maggie, you're standing in front of the mirror in your white lace dress. You're 18. Your hands are trembling, but your heart is full of dreams, of vows, of promises whispered in the dark. You think this is it? The beginning of your forever. And in some ways, you're right. But sweet girl, not every forever looks the way we imagined. I know what's coming. I know about the perfume, the laughter that isn't yours, the earring, the silence, the ache. I know how you'll fold his shirts and cry into the fabric, how you'll whisper prayers with cracked lips and sleep on the edge of the bed just to feel something. But I also know this. You won't stay broken. You'll walk through fire, barefoot. You'll eat dinners alone and learn to love the quiet. You'll learn to plant again, tomatoes, hope, peace. And one day, the pain won't define you. Your strength will. You'll find your voice, not in rage, not in revenge, but in calm. In choosing yourself again and again, even when no one else does. You'll make tea the way you like it. You'll laugh, truly laugh, under a stormy sky. You'll look at yourself in the mirror and say, "She made it, I made it." And Maggie, when he begs for a second chance, you won't scream. You'll smile. Because you'll have already walked away, inside, and no man can chase a woman who's finally walking toward herself. You'll never forget what happened, but you'll forgive yourself for not seeing it sooner, and you'll be proud. So proud, you were never foolish for loving, only for forgetting that you were worthy of love, too. So, go ahead, sweetheart. Say I do. Dance, cry, believe. Just promise me one thing. When the day comes, and it will, don't you ever confuse your softness with weakness. Your silence with surrender. Because one day, the world will hear you, and it will listen. With love, me, you, us. I hadn't been back to the house in years. Not since I sold it. Not since I packed up the last of my old life in a box, labeled memories, and left the key on the windowsill. But something pulled me back. Not out of longing, but closure. The kind that doesn't ache. The kind that feels like an exhale. The new owners had painted the shutters blue. There were wind chimes hanging on the porch now, and a red tricycle leaned against the steps. Life had gone on, even in the shell of what once held my silence. I walked slowly around the edge of the property. The garden beds were overgrown, wild with green and tangled vines, but in the back corner, beneath the oak tree, a single tomato plant still grew. Maybe it had survived all this time, or maybe it had started again, like I had. Either way, it was there, stubborn, alive. I closed my eyes and listened, not for ghosts, but for the woman I used to be. I saw her in flashes, sweeping the porch, tying her hair in a scarf, smiling even when she shouldn't have, trusting too soon, forgiving too often, but loving deeply, and that was never her flaw. I walked to the church down the street, the one where I'd married him. The doors were locked, but I sat on the steps. I didn't cry, I didn't feel anger, I just remembered. And in remembering, I felt grateful. Grateful for the girl who dared to love, grateful for the woman who finally loved herself more. As the sun dipped behind the steeple, I stood, brushed the dust from my jeans, and whispered, "I'm not who I was, but I honor her, and I forgive us both." I turned and walked back toward my car. And as I drove away, I didn't look in the rearview mirror. Not because I was afraid of the past, but because I had nothing left to retrieve from it. It started with a letter, folded in half, slipped into my mailbox at the quilting center. No name, no return address. Just 3 words on the outside. "Thank you, Maggie." Inside, a short note. Handwritten, careful, raw. I heard your story at church. I thought I was the only one. I've been silent for years, but because of you, I told my sister. And for the first time, I didn't feel ashamed. I read it twice, held it to my chest, and cried. Not the kind of tears that sting, the kind that release, the kind that say, you mattered. Your pain had purpose. After that, more came. Emails, notes, conversations in line at the grocery store. Women who looked me in the eyes and said, you gave me words I didn't have. You helped me forgive myself. I left. I stayed. I healed. Because I saw you do it. I didn't set out to inspire. I set out to survive. But there's something about truth. Once it leaves your mouth, it finds other mouths brave enough to open. I began hosting story circles on Tuesday nights. Women sat on old cushions and folding chairs in the rec center, telling their truths in soft voices, sometimes shaking, sometimes strong. There were tears, laughter, silence heavy with memory. And I realized, this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about us. All the women who had smiled through betrayal, who had made dinner with broken hearts, who had kept secrets that weren't theirs to carry. We became mirrors for one another. And in those reflections, we saw someone worth saving. One woman, Sharon, once said, Maggie, you made survival sound like a soft place to land. And maybe that's the legacy I never planned on, but the one I'm proud to leave. That love can rebuild, that pain can teach, that silence, once broken, can become a bridge. I wasn't just telling my story anymore. I was helping others tell theirs. And each one became a thread stitched into the quilt of something far bigger than all of us. These days, I wake up with the sun, not because I have to, but because I want to. The morning light slides across the wooden floor like it's painting blessings. And I walk barefoot to the kitchen, humming songs I once forgot I knew. There's peace in repetition. Coffee, porch, birdsong, breeze. I still live in a small town. Same Texas air, same dusty roads. But I'm not the same woman. I teach a writing class once a week at the library now. Nothing fancy, just women with stories and notebooks, and hands that tremble a little when they begin. Sometimes they ask me, do you still think about him? And I smile. Not bitter, not broken. I remember. I say, but it's just a memory, like an old scar there, but no longer bleeding. I have learned to love solitude, not loneliness. Solitude. I talk to the trees. I sing while planting. I dance in the kitchen when the mood strikes. I spoil my granny's, and I keep a pot of jasmine by my bedroom window, because it reminds me that life can still be fragrant after fire. I no longer wait for closure. Sometimes, you give it to yourself. I no longer chase apologies. Some people don't know how to be sorry, and that's not my burden to carry anymore. I write letters I'll never send. I bake too much pie and give half of it away. I reread old books with a different kind of heart. I've stopped pretending strength means never crying. Now, I cry when I need to, and I smile even more. Some Sundays, I sit on my porch with a pen and whisper to the wind. Thank you for not giving me what I thought I needed. You gave me instead. That's the real miracle. Not that I survived, but that I grew. Not just back, but bigger, deeper, wiser, softer, still. Because softness is not weakness. Softness is what lets the sunlight in. If you made it this far, thank you. Not just for listening to my story, but for holding space for your own. Because maybe, like me, you've sat in silence. Maybe you've laid in bed beside someone who stopped seeing you. Maybe you've folded clothes with tears burning your throat, or smiled in church while your heart screamed. If so, I want you to know this. You are not invisible. You are not broken beyond repair. You are not foolish for loving. You are a garden still blooming, even if the soil was once scorched. I told this story not for sympathy, but for connection. For that moment when one woman hears another and says, that happened to me too. And if this was your story, in some way, even in pieces, then I hope you carry this with you. You can forgive. Without forgetting, you can heal. Without rushing, you can begin again. Even if the world thinks you're too old, too soft, too late. There's no expiration date on dignity. No deadline for choosing peace. No shame in walking away or in staying, if you choose it fully and freely. And above all, there is life after betrayal. Not just survival, but joy, laughter, love, even if it starts with loving yourself again. So if you've been quiet, speak. If you've been doubting, breathe. If you've been waiting for a sign, let this be it. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to this channel. Tap the bell so you don't miss the next woman's story, because I promise, every voice matters here. Leave me a comment below. I read each one with all the tenderness I never gave myself years ago. Let's build a space where healing is not a secret. And don't go yet. Watch the story that's appearing right here on your screen. Another woman, another wound, another miracle in progress. Because here, on this porch, in this channel, in this heart, you are seen, you are loved, and your story is sacred.